Working as a hairstylist had taught me that every person who sat in my chair carried a story that wasn't immediately visible. Some came in celebrating promotions, engagements, or new beginnings, while others quietly hoped a different haircut might help them leave behind a painful chapter of their lives. Over the years, I had learned to pay attention not only to what clients asked for but also to how they said it. Confidence, hesitation, excitement, and fear all revealed themselves long before the scissors ever touched a strand of hair. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when the front door of the salon opened and a young woman stepped inside. She looked as though she couldn't have been older than 22. Her long brown hair reached almost to her waist, and despite the weather, she held herself unusually still, avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room. Behind her walked a large man whose broad shoulders nearly filled the doorway. He wasn't shouting or acting aggressively, but there was something about the way he stayed close to her that immediately caught my attention. Before the young woman had a chance to speak, the man looked directly at me. "Shave all of it off." The request hung in the air. I shifted my attention to the woman. She didn't say anything. Instead, she lowered her eyes toward the floor. I smiled gently and asked the question I asked every client before making a dramatic change. "What would you like to do with your hair?" The man answered again. "I already told you." I kept looking only at her. She hesitated for several seconds before quietly saying, "I'm not sure." That answer was enough for me. Salon policy was simple. Major changes had to be confirmed directly by the person receiving the service. It didn't matter whether the companion was a spouse, a parent, or anyone else. I smiled politely. "Why don't we have a quick consultation first?" The man frowned. "We don't need one. It only takes a minute." Without waiting for permission, I invited the young woman to sit in my styling chair while the man remained in the reception area. He didn't seem pleased, but he sat down anyway. As I gently combed through her hair, I lowered my voice. "Are you sure this is what you want?" She stared at her reflection. "I don't know. You don't have to decide immediately." Her eyes filled with tears so quickly that I almost hadn't noticed until one escaped down her cheek. "I don't want to shave it." The room suddenly felt much quieter. "You don't have to." She took a shaky breath. "He says it'll teach me a lesson." I paused. "I don't need details," I said softly. "I just need to know what you want." She looked at herself in the mirror for a long moment. "I only wanted a trim." I nodded. "Then that's the only service I'm willing to perform." Relief washed across her face, though it was quickly replaced by worry. "He's going to be angry." I carefully placed the comb on the counter. "Leave that conversation to me." I walked back toward the reception area. The man stood immediately. "Finished already?" I smiled professionally. "She has decided she'd like a simple trim today." His expression hardened. "No." I remained calm. "The decision belongs to the client. I brought her here, and she's the one sitting in the chair." For several tense seconds neither of us spoke. Finally he shook his head in frustration. "Forget it." He turned toward the young woman. "Let's go." She looked at him, then at me. For the first time since arriving, she spoke clearly. "No." He seemed genuinely surprised. "What?" I said no. The silence that followed felt endless. Then, without another word, he walked out of the salon, letting the door slam behind him. Nobody moved until his car disappeared from the parking lot. Only then did the young woman begin crying openly. One of my coworkers quietly locked the front door for a few minutes to give her privacy. She apologized repeatedly. "I'm so embarrassed." "You have nothing to apologize for." After several minutes she finally relaxed enough to explain. They had been dating for almost a year. Recently, arguments had become more frequent, and he had begun making decisions for her that had nothing to do with him, from what she wore to which friends she saw. Earlier that morning they had argued, and he announced that cutting off all her hair would be a consequence for not listening. As she spoke, it became painfully clear that the haircut itself had never been the real issue. It was about control. When she finished, I asked only one question. Do you feel safe going home today? She thought carefully before answering. No, I nodded. Then let's help you figure out your next step. One of my coworkers offered her a cup of tea while another quietly helped her contact a close friend who agreed to pick her up. She also reached out to a local support service that could help her think through her options and make a plan. No one pressured her or told her what she had to do. We simply made sure she wasn't facing the situation alone. Before she left, I gave her the trim she had originally wanted. Nothing dramatic, just enough to freshen the ends. When I turned the chair toward the mirror, she smiled for the first time all afternoon. I actually recognized myself. That's the goal. Several months passed before I saw her again. This time she walked into the salon by herself. She looked different, not because of her hairstyle but because of the confidence in the way she carried herself. I thought you might remember me. I do, she laughed. I wanted to thank you. She told me she had ended the relationship that very week. It hadn't been easy, but with support from friends and family, she had built a new life for herself. She had started a different job, moved into a small apartment, and was slowly rediscovering interests she had abandoned during the relationship. Then she smiled mischievously. I actually do want a much shorter haircut now. I laughed. Are you absolutely sure? She grinned, this time, completely. As I carefully cut her hair into a stylish shoulder-length look, she watched each strand fall with excitement instead of fear. The transformation wasn't about changing who she was. It was about making a choice that belonged entirely to her. When she stood to leave, she paused at the door. You know, she said, that day wasn't really about my hair. I know, it was the first time in a long time someone reminded me that my voice still mattered. After she left, I thought about how easily ordinary moments can become meaningful without anyone realizing it. Sometimes the most important service a professional provides isn't the haircut, the styling, or the finished result. Sometimes it's simply recognizing that the person in the chair deserves to make their own decisions. Respect begins with listening, and even a simple question asked at the right moment can remind someone that their choices, their dignity, and their voice belong to them alone.